You ever been on a team that, on paper, has all the talent in the world, but it just can't get anything done? It's one of the most frustrating things, right? When a team of all-stars just completely fails to perform. Well, in this explainer, we're going to break down a really fascinating case study of how one team turned that exact situation around, transforming their biggest weakness into their greatest strength. Okay, let's dive in. So our story kicks off at this big professional services organization. They've pulled together two, high-performing, cross-functional teams for a super critical client project. I mean, this was supposed to be the dream team. You had strong leadership, you had clear goals, plenty of resources. Success felt like a total sure thing.
But yeah, the reality was something else entirely. As the project lead put it, they weren't short of talent, they were drowning in it. With so many A players packed into one room, every single discussion just spiraled into this battle of wills and progress ground to a complete halt. So what does drowning in talent actually look like day to day? Well, it looks like a really rapid and pretty destructive downward spiral. Let's break down exactly how things started to unravel for this team. The breakdown was basically a domino effect. First, communication just collapsed. That, of course, led to incredibly tense meetings. Then deadlines started slipping, which triggered actual financial penalties for the project. But honestly, the real damage was to the trust. It completely eroded, and what used to be collaboration turned into this toxic culture of constant finger-pointing. It was a total mess.
At this point, it was obvious that, simple fixes like sending more status updates just weren't going to cut it. They needed a fundamental shift in how they operated. And this is where the story takes a really interesting turn. An intervention came in that didn't try to get rid of the conflict, but to actually reframe it and use its energy for good.
The solution was this approach called strengths-based coaching. And here's the big idea. Instead of seeing all that friction and disagreement as a problem, this method reframes it as a sign of untapped potential. The core idea is that conflict happens when the strengths of really talented, passionate people clash instead of complement each other. So the goal isn't to get rid of disagreement, but to make it productive. Okay, that sounds great in theory, right? But how do you actually do that? How do you put it into practice? So let's get into the nitty-gritty, the practical 4-step process this team used to basically rebuild their way of working from the ground up. All right, here's the roadmap they followed. It all started with step 1, building psychological safety. Because let's be real, if there's no trust, nothing else is going to work. Second, they diagnosed the dysfunction using an established framework so that everyone could speak the same language. Third, they worked on leveraging their individual strengths, turning those points of friction into real assets. And finally, they co-created a team charter to make the new rules of engagement official and, most importantly, owned by everyone.
And the power of that first step, just building safety, the impact was immediate. As one team member said, creating that space was the turning point. For the first time, people felt like they could lower their defenses, talk candidly about the real issues, and actually listen without being afraid of getting attacked. This was the foundation for everything that came next. Now for step 2, diagnosing the problem, they used Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team framework. And this was so key because it gave them a neutral, shared vocabulary. So instead of pointing fingers at each other, saying, you did this, they could point to concepts like a lack of trust or a fear of conflict. It made the conversation about the system, not just the people in it. Step 3, leveraging strengths. This is where it gets really interesting. It was all about reframing that friction. For example, the team had 2 main groups. You had the achievers, who were always pushing for speed, and the analysts, who were always pushing for more depth. And they were constantly butting heads. The breakthrough was when they realized these weren't opposing forces. They were complementary assets. I mean, think about it. A successful project needs both, right? It needs pace and it needs quality. And the final step was to make this new way of working stick. They co-created a team charter. Together. And this is so important. It wasn't some document handed down from management. No, the team themselves defined their new rules for how they'd communicate, how they'd make decisions, and crucially, how they were going to handle conflict from now on. This whole process created real shared ownership. So we've walked through the whole 4-step process. But the big question is, did any of it actually work? Let's take a look at the payoff, both in the hard data and in the team's culture. And the results were super tangible, not just, feel good. Collaboration, the thing that had totally collapsed into finger pointing, shot up by 29%. Openness and clarity, which were the root causes of all those tense meetings, both jumped by 14%. These weren't just numbers. They were measurable proof that they were reversing their biggest problems.
And beyond the numbers, the cultural shift was just profound. The day-to-day experience was transformed. Team members went from feeling like they were walking on eggshells to actually tackling tough conversations with confidence. And get this, meetings went from being dreaded events to being described as the highlight of my week. I mean, that is a true night and day difference.
Now, we have to be realistic here. This wasn't some magic wand, and the work isn't totally over. The team themselves identified that keeping up that high level of accountability and making sure there's consistent follow-through, well, that's their next big challenge. It's just a great reminder that building a truly high-performing team is a continuous journey. It never really ends.
So, what's the core lesson from this team's incredible journey? Let's try and distill the single biggest takeaway for any team out there that's dealing with conflict.
As a senior leader on the project put it, the coaching helped them turn conflict into their greatest driver of performance. And this really gets to the heart of it. True strength isn't just about what you do well when things are easy. It's about how you show up when things get tough. By reframing their disagreements, the team unlocked the hidden power in their friction, turning their biggest weakness into their greatest asset. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The next time you see friction or tension on your own team, instead of just seeing it as a problem to be solved, try asking yourself this: what are the underlying strengths that are clashing here, and what incredible potential might be hidden right inside that very same friction?